Hey everyone, welcome back to another GeoGeS 2.2 editor guide series video. Today we're going to look at all of the camera triggers. They are very simple to use. There is only 8 of them. You're going to learn them very easily by the end of this video. So right off the bat, ignore all of these and go to the final one, the guide trigger. When you place the guide trigger, you'll see that you're going to have 3 different rectangles. You have this main one here. In the yellow, you have the green one, which is slightly bigger, and then you have this kind of orange one for the outside. And basically what the guide trigger does is exactly what it says. It's just going to show you the positioning of the camera, and you can customize it, of course, because maybe sometimes you want to see how the camera is going to look if it's at a specific zoom. So click the trigger, go to edit object, and then you can customize a few things here. If you click the info button, you're going to see that this is basically to preview the camera bounce. So if you want to see if your camera is going to have a specific zoom, if it's going to show something, this is your way to preview that. So the inner line is the guaranteed 4:3 view if you have those kind of square devices, and then you have the other aspect ratios outside there, but it's extremely simple to use. In edit object, you can customize the zoom of it. So very simple like that. And again, keep in mind, this does not change your camera in game. It's only a preview to help you know what is going to be shown. So by default, the zoom is set to 1, which is the default camera zoom. You can also put different offsets on the x-axis and also on the y-axis. You can of course change the preview opacity. I wanted to show this one first because it's the easiest way to know if your zoom is going to be correct, if your camera is going to be placed in the correct position. So yeah, I just wanted to show that first. We're going to use this trigger later, so keep that in mind. Okay, so first of all, zoom. Zoom is probably the easiest one out of all of these. When you press play, you're going to have this default zoom, which is the value of number 1. But if you want to change the zoom, place the zoom trigger, go to edit object, and then you can change the zoom right here. So the zoom value is, of course, the amount of zoom that you want to do. And by default, the value is 1. So if you want to go back to the normal zoom, just put number 1 there. And you have the time value, which is basically how long it's going to take for that movement to happen, or for that zoom to happen rather. So my camera is currently set to the zoom 1. If I put it to zoom 2, it's gonna zoom in to 2. If I put the time to 0, it's gonna instantly zoom to 2 right there. But if I want to make that movement longer, I can add some time. I'll put 2 seconds here. So once I pass through the camera, it's going to zoom like that. But you can see that's not a very smooth movement. So you can go to edit object again and change the easing. These are the only 3 values that you can edit in this trigger, and it's extremely simple. If you want to do ease in out, you can do ease in out, and you can see that it's a lot smoother. You can also do many different ones. You can do maybe bounce in out. If you, I don't know, maybe you're doing, I don't know why you would use that one, but something that you're also going to notice is that every single trigger has the touch trigger and the spawn trigger buttons. Understanding what these 2 buttons do is very important. Touch trigger basically makes so your trigger is going to be activated on touch. So if I activate touch trigger and then touch it, it's going to activate, but if I don't touch it, then it's not going to activate. So touch trigger means that your trigger is going to be activated upon touch, and this applies for any trigger in the game. If you have a move trigger or a rotate trigger, a camera trigger, song trigger, sound effect, anything, it'll only be affected by touch if you toggle this thing here. And you also have spawn trigger. Spawn trigger means that your trigger will only be activated from another trigger, usually a spawn trigger. A spawn trigger is going to activate that trigger, and multi-trigger means that it can be activated multiple times. This can be useful in platformer levels, stuff like that. I'm not going to get into it in this video, but just looking at the camera here. So yeah, you already learned the first one. It's the zoom, and now I want to have a little movement. Once you get on top of this platform, I want the camera to be stuck on that platform kind of thing. So you can use static for that. As the name says, static makes your camera static, and this looks kind of wild here, but it's very easy to set it up. If you click the help button, it kind of explains how it works. Just makes the camera static around a target object. And if you watched my last editor guide video in which I explain what is a target object, what is a target group ID, you know that to set an object as a target, you have to give it a name kind of, and a group is basically that name. So we're going to use the star as the target ID. I want my camera to be static and then have this star as the center of it. So we're going to go to edit group next list free, and then I'm gonna add group. In this case, for me, it's number 1. For you, it might be different, depends on your level. But I added group 1 to that start. If I go to the static trigger and then go to edit object and set the target group ID to number 1, my camera is gonna center itself on that star. So duration here is the same as the zoom trigger. You wanna set up how long the movement, the camera change is gonna take to happen. I'm gonna set up my duration to 0.5 seconds. So now when I play, you can see that the movement is kind of wonky, but it works. It's set to the center right there. To make the movement less wonky, you can use smooth velocity. In the info here, it says smooth velocity makes the transition to the target adapt to the current camera velocity. Recommended no easing. And it's recommended to use this with no easing because it's gonna adapt to the camera's movement already, so it doesn't need any easing. So if I turn on smooth velocity and press save and play, you can see now that it's gonna be so much smoother right there. You have this modifier thingy here that appears once you click smooth velocity. This basically changes how the movement wave is. From what I've seen, it doesn't really matter if you have this on 0 or on 1. It's kind of like, I don't see a difference at all. You can also use follow. Follow is very important here because sometimes you want your camera to be static, but you want it to be locked to this object. But let's say I want this object to move. I want to make this object move up, and then I want the camera to follow that object. So this star already has group 1, and I put a move trigger here that moves it 7 blocks up in half a second. And if you play, you're gonna see that it doesn't follow the star really. Even though it has the target group ID, it doesn't follow the star. That's because it doesn't have the follow property there. So if you toggle that on, once you play level again, you can see that the camera is actually gonna follow that. And you can change the easing as well. It goes from 0 to 50. If you do 0, it's gonna absolutely stick to the object. And if you have a bit of easing, let's say 2.7 there, it's gonna take a little longer. It's just kind of this little bit of easing. It's just kind of what the name says. It just makes the movement a bit smoother if you want to move it around. I don't want to move it around, so I'm just going to remove that. So yeah, that's basically how it works. So by default, the static trigger actually doesn't move at all. It's completely static as the name says. But sometimes you want it to not move on the x-axis, so horizontally, but you want it to move up and down, or vice versa. So let's say in this case here, I have my gameplay and then I go on top of this platform and I go all the way up, but I can't see my icon anymore. There are a few different ways to fix that, but the correct and the easiest way is just to go to edit object and then put X only. This means the camera is going to be static on the x-axis but not on the y-axis. And if you don't know that, X means horizontal and Y means vertical. So now it's set to X only. If I play now and then I go up the platform, you can see that the camera now follows the player when it goes up, which is awesome. And you can do the same thing for Y only. If you want your level to still move from left to right, but not up and down, you can just set it on Y only. And then once you're playing, even if you make a very tall platform like that, your camera is not going to move up or down. This can be very useful when you're making a little corridor. In 2.1, you had to use a dual portal to kind of make the game look like it had a border on the top and the bottom. And then you had to hide the other icon. It was a whole crazy thing. But now you can just use one trigger for that, and it's so much better. And of course, I cannot forget that to exit static, just duplicate your static trigger and then turn on exit static. That's gonna make it exit static, as the name says. Now it's back to normal. So we already learned how to use the zoom and the static triggers. Now time to go for offset. Offset is very simple as well. It's basically what we did in the guide trigger here. Offset is basically this. That is the center, and if you offset, it's gonna change from left to right and up or down. So always remember, the x-axis is for the horizontal values. If it's positive, it's gonna go to the right. If it's negative, it's gonna go to the left. Y is for vertical. If it has positive values, it's gonna go up. If it has negative values, it's gonna go down. So same thing here in the offset. You can do X only or Y only. In this case here, I wanted to offset up by 10 blocks, let's say. And here it has the same value. Move time is basically the same thing as duration. It's the amount of time that's going to take for that movement to happen. I'm going to do ease in out for this case. So you can see once I exit the static and the camera moves up by the offset that I made. You can also do that on the x-axis. Let's say I wanted to move a little bit behind. So once I'm here, you can see that now the camera is more to the left. That's probably the easiest trigger right there. We now have gameplay offset, and gameplay offset is also a very easy one. If you click the info here, it basically says that it's going to change the offset between the player and the camera center. So if the value here is 0, the player will be in the center of the camera, because you probably noticed that when you're playing a level, you're always a little bit on the left, of course, so you can see more on the right. But sometimes you want to have a specific transition or effect that requires the player being in the center. So once you're playing here, we have the static, we have the offset that we set up. Now we have gameplay offset, and you can see that now I am in the center of the screen, the exact center. And then to go back to default, just go to edit object, click default, and it's gonna return to 2.5 again. You can also do don't zoom depending on the zoom setting that you have. You can also do X and Y only. So here in the level, you're gonna see that it centers, and then now it goes back to normal position. It's also extremely simple. Now we have a rotate camera, which is another very simple one. It has only 2 different values here and 2 little check boxes, and info says it all. It rotates the camera. You have the move time as default. Move time is basically the duration of the movement or how fast the rotation happens. You have easing. You have the option to add the current value to the camera rotation or to just set that value as the rotation itself. Let's say the current camera is at 30 degrees. If I put 100 here and then click add, it's gonna add another 100 degrees to that current camera setting. So it's gonna go to 130. But if you want to set that exact degree value, you can just disable this and it's gonna go to 100. I'm gonna do a very simple example here. I'm gonna put the rotate trigger right there, and I want it to rotate 30 degrees in half a second. We're gonna do ease in out. When playing, you're gonna see that we now rotated 30 degrees. So now let's say I wanted to rotate another 30 degrees. If I just place another 30-degree rotation trigger, it's not going to work because the camera is already at 30 and then it's going to set it to 30 again, so nothing is going to happen. But if you want to add the value, just click add, and now it's going to change from 30 to 60 because it adds another 30 degrees. But let's get rid of that one. We're not going to use add for now. So 90 degrees makes it go vertically, so it's going to go down like that. If you do minus 90 degrees, it's going to do the opposite. You're going to go up instead, and then you can do 180 that basically flips the level, and then you can do 360, which is, you know, the usual full rotation. We have edge and mode triggers. Edge is very simple. It's basically gonna limit the movement of your screen, but doesn't static already do that? Well, technically yes, but in a different way. Static trigger makes the camera lock to one object specifically. Edge instead makes so everything is free except past that object. So I'm gonna change this level here to platformer in this case to make things easier. We're also gonna get rid of all of these other triggers here because we don't need them anymore. I'm gonna give myself the jetpack. So yeah, we are here and we can move to the right and we can move to the left freely, and the camera works for everything. But let's say I want to lock this area, so you cannot go to the right, but you can still see a bunch of stuff on the right, and I do not want you to see that. You can simply use the edge trigger for that. So let's say everything past this hexagon here cannot be seen. So I'm gonna give it a group ID. In this case is group ID 1, and then I'll place an edge trigger, and then you can set up the camera edge right here. For me, in this case, I'm setting up the right edge, so I'm gonna go to the trigger and then I'm gonna click right to let the trigger know that I'm setting up the right edge. So I'm gonna click right and then put the target ID that I want. So now if I move to the right, I can't see anything past the hexagon. Of course, by default, it's at the center of the object. So if I didn't want the player to see anything after the block, I would have to have spaced that object exactly in the center there. And once I played, it would be exactly locked at the position block right there. And I can't see anything after it. And just like I did for the right edge, you can do for the left, up, and down. And of course, to unlock the edge, just click unlock, and then it's gonna go back to default. So we have target 1 here, and then here we're gonna unlock it. We're gonna make this one activate on touch just to make the example easier. So if I press play here, the camera is stuck there, but then if I touch that, it's now unstuck and I can see everything around the level. So yeah, edge trigger also learned. It's also one of the very easy ones. And now for the last one, mode. Mode is also very easy. It basically makes the camera free. It basically removes the borders for the game modes. So as you saw there in the jetpack, I have a limit here. I can't go up any further than that. I actually, whoa, I just fell on the same. That is crazy. I just made, so I want to move up more and I want to move up freely. You can just set up a mode trigger here and then toggle free mode on. And that's going to make my jetpack free to go up as much as it wants to. Of course, the editor has a limit, but it's not going to be limited to the portal, to the game mode itself. Then you can edit the camera settings. Of course, you can change the padding and the easing. The padding is basically how close the player has to be to the corner for the camera to start moving. For instance, if I set the padding to 0, I can get at the very top here and the camera will not change unless I actually touch the corner. Same thing for the bottom here. I have to be extremely close to the corner for it to start moving around. If I change the padding to the max, just by moving slightly up here, the camera is already kind of follow it there. You're gonna basically be more kind of centered. That looks so cool. And then you can change the easing, of course, to make the movement smoother. So now that you learned how to use the camera triggers, you might as well want to know how to make a proper level using them. So if this was helpful, subscribe for more helpful videos that will be upcoming. If you liked the video, make sure to click the like button and hit the subscribe button, of course. And if you didn't like the video, dislike it and comment how I can improve. It's not like we can see the dislikes anyway. So yeah, comment how the video could have improved if you didn't like it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. I have many things planned and yeah, we'll see how that goes, but thank you very much. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.